Friday, the 28th of November, 2025. And I'm calling this the Conspiracy Corner or Conspiracy Hangout. It's a good term for it. This is not a professional show, and I just like to share events, especially that have captured a lot of like international attention, and then just see for myself if the media and politicians are telling us the truth or not. But anyways, a lot going on, and I will say that people like Moose on the Loose, Jasmine Lane, Mario for the North, Dan Dix, Pat King. There's so many True North, Northern Perspective, incredible accounts out there within Canada that are sharing good information, and they risk getting targeted for hate speech laws, myself included, ridiculously enough. But again, I don't have a platform like they do. And because of pushing Bill C9, which people have been talking about all over social media now for the last few days, I think it's a terrible idea. Against censorship bills, criminalize protected speech. And yet again, we have these liberal radicals within the House of Commons. Again, not all liberals, but within the House of Commons that are lying to people. The media is lying to people. It's state-funded leftist media. Propaganda, very, very biased, very obviously biased, especially in Ottawa, which is again is where like a lot of things happen, where a lot of these bills and policies and measures are implemented and adopted and anyways. And so these accounts that I just mentioned, they are sharing information, corruption that is happening from within the House of Commons. And anyway, it's just getting so censored, and so further censorship of people that would be considered to be dissidents that are calling out the government. And I've said this before that like there is training that has been conducted. This was a few years ago. I was just letting this be known because I think it's very important that that people within the highest levels of government are training teams to target people from within other countries, to quash dissidents, people that are speaking out on things that are truthful, but they don't want to get out there. And I think it was like veterans that were number one on the list for top of the list for the targets. And so even a few years ago, I've been talking about this. It's now obvious, becoming more and more obvious that I've said this before. It's going to be increasing in Western countries unless we do something about this. And look what's happening in the U.S. and Canada. And it's unfortunate. Sorry, my cat really wants to be in this video, I think. And so Guilbeault quits. He's a traitor to Canada, definitely a radical, definitely stole lots of money from us. And he gets to quit because he doesn't like the new memorandum of understanding that was put in place, proposed, and but it doesn't even have a timeline, I don't believe, or a budget for it. So, and again, this guy again gets to quit, probably get a great cushy job, making a lot of money yet again, and at least he's not going to be in a place where he can like destroy Canada as much as he already has. So again, this guy should have been investigated, and not. But anyways, at least he's out. Hopefully more of the traitors within cabinet resign, since law enforcement won't do anything about all the corruption and scandals, right? And then when you criminalize free speech, protected speech, they're going to be even further inundated with responding to nonsense, subjective data instead of looking at actual stats and actually focusing on a lot of like major crimes and violent crimes that are happening in major city centers and expanding outwards to the suburbs. So anyway, I'm gonna go through these briefly, what I'm going to be talking about today, and then I'm going to show some clips from my social media. The Afghan national who shot the National Guard's heroes, people of service to their country. And even in the shooting a few years ago, people tried to say that this was targeting the LGBTQ plus IA community. No, it was targeting Americans. This was another Afghan national. I've talked about this in other videos if you want to take a look. Tops or something. No, not Tops. That was another shooting. But anyway, I forget what the location was, this bar. But yeah, it was in retaliation or in response to actions committed by Americans and Canadians overseas. And we're just allowing this in. And I do know people that were assisting with getting people that were interpreters and that had worked with us, our Canadian government, when we were overseas. And I did say that the company that I was operating in, we were the ones that were one of the subsections, whatever you want to call it. Anyways, we call it company, admin company, but they were the ones that were coordinating the hiring and vetting and such of interpreters, and they were used before my tour and after my tour, except for many years, and some of them absolutely did target us, and try to even detonate IEDs right, like during patrols, like right in front of everyone. It's like, what the hell, dude? Luckily, it didn't go off, right? But it's like rude, anyway. And but anyways, and I assisted to I assisted with giving information to certain groups that were going to be going over, and offered my services. I said I can go over. I've been all over Afghanistan, and I was a convoy operations officer, and but because I wasn't vaccinated, couldn't go. Unbelievable. And I'm like, are you like, this is ridiculous. At that point, I was in my late 30s. I was super healthy, and no comorbid conditions. And then I could have possibly came with lists to verify people, right? Because it's like, we can't just bring anyone in, right? Just because they claim they are who they say they are, and because like that happens as well, right? And anyway, it's just a shame. Yeah, and Candace, this possible alleged threat from French legionnaires, very specific. There are multiple people that are saying that this is possibly credible. And I haven't seen any proof yet, but apparently it was submitted. I don't know why she doesn't just release it, though. Honestly, if you're going to give it to the government that you're saying that you don't trust, then and only them, it's confusing. But obviously should be taken seriously, because again, if it would be very tragic again if anything happened to her. She's a mother. Anyway, it is what it is. But Pavel Durov, the owner of Telegram, he was corroborating, saying that he did believe it was possibly true, kind of like reinforce what she had stated. And anyway, so I think that she's going to be, well, I mean, it's Thanksgiving in the US, so happy Thanksgiving to everyone. I hope you have a wonderful weekend this weekend. But she could possibly just be taking that week off because of it being a holiday. Who knows? But anyway. And the pipe bomb, CBS and leftist media has said that the pipe bomb alleged planter has an alibi that completely debunks the story. And I'm going to share a video, just one, but there's multiple out there, but there's a lot of questions with that. And so maybe I'll start. I'll start with Instagram. No, I'll start with X because there's less to share. Okay. Yeah, so this was from Pete Hegseth, an American hero at home with the Lord. Rest in peace, Specialist Sarah Beckstrom. Rest in peace, Specialist Sarah Beckstrom. May our nation kneel in prayer for her family. Somerville, West Virginia. One of the National Guardsmen savagely attacked yesterday in Washington, D.C. Just passed away. That was posted 17 hours ago. That's so tragic. Anyways. Mark Carney is going to raid Canada's pension funds? Question mark. Good thing, bad thing? Legal? Illegal? This was a good video that was sent to me yesterday by
in the UK.
An immigrant to Canada. Came in, I think 5 years ago. Great person. And so, again, I'm saying it's a majority of majority of people, awesome. And again, I do support immigration, but again, it has to be at sustainable levels. And from 2020 to till now, it's just been overwhelming for everyone involved. And there are people that are exploiting that have exploited that, and they are part of organized crime rings. So the human trafficking, the drug trafficking, the weapons trafficking, etc. The B&Es. We're starting to see more grooming gangs again. It's out of control. It's not out of control, but it's getting there, especially in major city areas. And it was already bad 10 years ago. I can only imagine what they're dealing with. People reach out to me every once in a while from Toronto Police Peel region, because I do have contacts from there as well, and they say it's just wild what's going on and what's being proposed. and what has been proposed in order to mitigate, which is absolutely not working. We're adding fuel to the fire. And it's the people on the ground, the first responder types on the ground, they're the ones that are suffering and having to deal with this politicized, two-tiered justice system. Anyway, from this guy, Robin Hillier, how Mark Carney and Brookfield are raiding Canada's pensions.
Realize what he has done and what he is doing, you will realize we are in a catastrophic death spiral, and he is making a ludicrous amount of money in the process. I'm going to preface this and tell you a little bit about Mark Carney because it's important information. I will keep this as simple as possible so it is easy to understand, and I will use analogies to simplify it further on the end so you can grasp exactly what has been going on. So Mark Carney championed net zero. He started GFANZ in the UK in 2019. The accumulated total of the capital access was over $130 trillion. His net zero actually started to collapse when Republican attorneys started to subpoena banks in the US for anti-competition regulations. JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Citigroup, Wells Fargo, Goldman Sachs, and so forth all exited net zero. So he championed de-risking green energy investment because there's no return on green energy. You'll be a decade to 2 decades before it's actually profitable, if ever. And this is very important because what you do is you take federal funds, taxpayer funds, you absorb all of the liability and cost to make sure that the investment succeeds, and you offer this as a guarantee so the private investors will come and invest in that project. Bloomberg announced in 2020 that Carney was the unofficial economic advisor to Trudeau. Since he is unpaid and unofficial, it does not trigger the Conflict of Interest Act, and he has complete influence over Trudeau's policy with zero consequence. So the 3 key figures are Chrystia Freeland, Justin Trudeau, and Mark Carney. Chrystia Freeland being the finance minister. From 2020 to 2025, approximately $190 billion has been allotted to de-risk green energy investment. Now, the problem comes when GFANZ is collapsing, that $130 trillion disappears. There's only one place that you can access that kind of capital as cash on hand, and that is a country's...
I do need to say this. I'm sorry for cutting this guy off, but I hope people are aware of just how obvious they are now. They just don't even care with their grift. Chrystia Freeland, who literally screwed Canada over, the worst deputy prime minister, the worst finance minister, an awful human being. And respectfully, this is not condescending to journalists at all. But again, that does not give you the experience, the skill sets, the capacity, the experience, all of that stuff to be in those positions. This to me was a DEI hire. Clearly, she's a traitor to Canada. Now this woman, who again is very connected to Trudeau, very connected to Carney. Again, like even family ties here, right? With him being her son's godparent. You couldn't get any more obvious, right? Like finance within the finance, but in an area where like he wouldn't be held liable or accountable for anything that he was doing, implementing. That literally like that destroyed our economy, just to be clear, and not just our economy, people's lives. Now she's going to Ukraine, where again we're still being lied to about what's going on in Europe and what's been going on in Ukraine and Russia, especially since 2014. People are now finally a little bit more open to like addressing that and the corruption from within Ukraine. And again, this is not to say anything positive about Russia. I'm saying that Putin is also guilty of war crimes, crimes against humanity. There's protests within his country, all of that stuff. But he's trying to build an empire, and it's just, and so is Zelensky. But again, like a lot of our money is not going to where it needs to go in Ukraine. I've said this, and they do not want to do an audit since the start of the war. They took that out of the peace deal. Okay, they wanted complete liability removal, and that's a fact. I fact checked that. Disgusting. So absolutely, it should not be in the peace deal. Like people that were working within the government, like they, especially again with the audit, people that would be impacted by that, we should not be covering for those crimes. Hundreds of thousands of people have died now, needlessly, for a proxy war that's been set up and enabled and supported by people within the American government, within NATO's, within the Five Eyes community. And I hate saying that because I've worked with these organizations. I've risked my life for these organizations. I've had people that I cared about deeply who I've lost even in war. I've attended ramp ceremonies, been part of them, etc. And the fact that There's even people that I know that I care for that have been involved in pushing propaganda, psychological operations, lying about what's actually going on, a false narrative, like analyses and reports in briefs that need to be updated because again, like it's not correct at all. Unfortunately, anyways, it's a disappointment. And so yeah, she's going to be there in order to manage money and put it where she and Carney and Trudeau want it to go. And again, over $4 billion more that we're awarding to kill more people, destroy more homes, more infrastructure. It's just absolutely nonsensical to me. And there has to be a rebuild phase. And of course, BlackRock will be involved in that. Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Brookfield. Okay, rant over. But yeah, she should not be in that position. How is that not a conflict of interest? How is that not just like the biggest scandal in the last week? Maybe not, actually in the last 2 days. It's incredible. She should not have that position. She has been incorrect. She has no idea what's actually going on. So what, just because she has some Ukrainian lineage that makes her like the default subject matter expert? Guess what? My partner, he has Ukrainian lineage too. Likely more than her. Maybe not. I don't know. Strong Ukrainian lineage. Does that like make him the default expert on Ukraine? Respectfully speaking, no. He does know the truth about what's going on. He would be way better at the position, but he's on again, his position is drastically different than Chrystia Freeland's, and he was actually on the ground during this conflict as well. And that's all I'll say about that. So again, more aware. This is what I mean. Like they paint themselves out like these liberal or House of Commons morons, especially within cabinet. People that have been like cycling through cabinet positions now for years. And they literally have no idea what's going on in the world. They have no pulse on reality at all.
Pension fund. So through Trudeau, he created all the de-risk policy. Through Freeland, who Trudeau appointed, and remember, Mark Carney is the godfather of her child, the Canadian Growth Fund is created for $15 billion, which is used to de-risk green energy investment. Stick with me here because this is very important. The public service pension has very strict regulations for investing. It is only applicable to very low risk and typically an IRR compounding return. So you can't take pension money and de-risk green energy investment, and you can't use it to invest in green energy because it's typically a net loss. However, Mark's first transition fund, Brookfield Growth Transition Fund 1, later renamed 2, has PSP pension funds and Ontario Teachers pension funds as limited partners LLPs in that transition fund. Oh, that's why that's in there. And I thought, how did he get pension funds into that transition fund? Trudeau, obviously. All the board members of the Public Service Pension and the Canadian Growth Fund are selected through a process of the Treasurer and the Finance Minister. At the end of the day, the Prime Minister gets final approval. These individuals are paid between 6 and 7 figures, and the Prime Minister can remove them at any time without cause. Do you think you would listen to me if I can remove your 7-figure salary just like that? Yet these management systems are considered bipartisan. They are a political tool. The PSP also created a subsidiary called the CCFIM that manages that $15 billion Canadian Growth Fund. Try not to lose me here. So the final close on the Brookfield Transition Fund 2, which Mark managed with Teskey, is $20 billion. And there is another transition fund with contracts with the UAE called the Catalytic Transition Fund for billions of dollars as well. Because this is routed through subsidiaries, disclosure becomes obscured. Now we're going to get to the smoking gun. This is just one example. Brookfield makes an initial investment of $300 million from this transition fund into Entropy Inc. in Canada. That is now a majority stake, and because it's not an investment in profit return, it meets the threshold for the PSP, which is your pension money. So a typical management fee at Brookfield for the entire fund is between 1.5 and 2%. What generally happens is as 100% of the capital is returned, I say returned, but you don't actually return the funds, there's then a 5 to 8% hurdle after that. There's a catch-up phase where Brookfield will collect 20%, and then after that, there's an 80-20 split to the pension fund, which is the LLP, the limited partner. I should put that in the beginning. So the typical time frame and thresholds for Mark Carney to collect on that extraordinary 20% could take up to 10 to 15 years. And now comes the magic. They used the Canadian Growth Fund to de-risk the entire project on a contract for 15 years on a guarantee for $16 million a year and $200 million up front. That means all liability, all debt, and all carrying right to the finish line is taken on by the Canadian taxpayer. So we would support the project right to the end, be at a net loss as the completed project belongs to a foreign entity who collects all of the profits and reaps all of the rewards. If you didn't think that was bad enough, here is the nuke. When a government contract de-risks the investment, it is legally binded and can be front-loaded immediately, which means that 15-year valuation that is down the road occurs instantaneously, jumps the hurdle, and the 20% kicks in immediately. So not only are we at a net loss, the project will be foreign owned, and we have debt for the next 15 years, and Carney gets paid immediately. Do you have any idea what the 20% payout plus management fee, even after you pay the other managers and the dividends are separated, just for Mark Carney? If he is able to de-risk the entire platform, and he's doing it right in front of your eyes, we are de-risking the UAE commitments, and the UAE has the contract with the Catalyst Transition Fund that he also managed. The maximum dollar amount is between $750 million to $1.2 billion. If you didn't notice, immediately after the budget was passed, all of these commitments start rolling in because they're all being de-risked. And the incredible part is this. He took your pension money, because you can't take tax money. It's not there. There's no pile of cash. Put it in a fund to attract other investors. It is a perfect circle, a snake eating its tail. And at the end of it, there's a net loss. We don't own the product. We don't own the profits. We'll get a little bit of tax and maybe some jobs. And Mark Carney will be a billionaire. That's like me taking all the money in your bank account, holding on to it to invest, taking half your check when you get it, taking 5% to put back in this money I took from you, and then keeping the rest. I hope you understand, as this continues, this is the ratio change that the Parliamentary Budget Officer is talking about. The debt is not only escaping the GDP, it's a contractual obligation for up to 20 years in some cases, meaning you can't escape. We are going to reach a no escape velocity, and even if you get him out of office, the damage cannot be recovered from. I have my suspicions that Chrystia Freeland was fully aware that this was going on, potentially has her own investments offshore, and she got the hell out as fast as she could when that last budget dropped, because Trudeau's budget.
And she's also she's been to the Bilderberg meetings as well and stuff like that, and part of WEF. And so even when they were going to do the elections on whether it was going to be her or Carney, I did favor Carney just because, again, I was saying, like, he's been a bit longer in the game. He has more connections, more established, et cetera, not so much of a dummy, respectfully speaking. But again, she is. And anyway.
Was Carney's budget. Trudeau, Freeland, Mark Carney, complicit across the board. And if any member of that PSP fund signed an LPA, that's the limited partnership agreement, with simple interest instead of compound interest, which is the standard IRR, they're going to have a big problem. Because I ran the numbers upside down and backwards to see how fast I could make my money if I were Mark Carney and I was influencing the policy, and I would have put in simple interest annually versus compounding, because your front load becomes even faster. So every time we de-risk a project for 10 to 15 years, the firm, like Brookfield, front loads the entire contract for the full 15 years because it's black and white, and jumps straight to the finish line to get paid instantly. Think about that. Guys, I'm not talking about a little bit of money. The $6 million in stocks that they talk about, they told you that on purpose. Because when the Brookfield representative was in the House being questioned recently, who was clearly trembling, mentioned the stocks, but he also said carried interest, which means your guy Mark Carney is going to be a billionaire. Do you understand why he came to Canada? Because he spent 4 years building this and trying to access our pension funds because it's cash on hand. He needed it. That's what he was after the entire time. And I said it, and he literally said it in a press conference the other day and mentioned the $2 trillion. If you think it might be a coincidence, I ran a statistical analysis on the probability of all of those policies landing and those investments occurring in that exact chronological order. And it would be the same as if you built a plane, I built a runway, and you accidentally landed on that runway and not even knew where it was. It is impossible. It was facilitated by Carney, Trudeau, and Chrystia Freeland, and Carney actually did it
Oh, not just
all
them.
because Trudeau is as dumb as a bag of bricks, which I've said. This is cascade payment, and I've left out about 1,000 details that would just overcomplicate it all for you, but all you need to know is that it's a snake eating its tail. It's a completely false payback on our own pension funds with our tax money. Pension, tax money. This is what's happening. Go ahead and look it up. Send this to your friends. Send this to any economist that you know. Send it to Mark Carney. Send it to every PSP board member. Send it to Chrystia Freeland. I want everyone to know exactly what he...
I retweeted this. Don Dussault, you can see my Twitter handle here, my X handle. And if you want to take a look at it. All right. So I think more people should be respectfully. Oh, yeah. Okay. So here's that. Like, this was posted 2 days ago. I posted this. This was the suspect who turned out to be confirmed. Some more videos of it. So freaking sad. But again, I said for my video for the predictions for this year that I made in January of 2025, like almost a year ago, I did say there was going to be an increase in domestic terrorism within Western countries. Take a look at that video almost a year ago. I said it would be far left and far right, but it would be like more largely on the left, or on people that are on the left, right? Because we've got people within like the pro-Palestine movements that are the same people that are part of the LGBTQ plus protests and the abortion protests and the you name it, whatever. Okay. All right. Let's see where I started here. Okay, so I don't get to put a lot of, obviously, because there's a limited amount of tweets or characters in the post. But anyways, so this is regarding Bill C9 because again, people are talking about it a lot, and I think that if people take a look at Bill C9, again, come up with your own interpretations of it. Take a look at it yourself. Throw it in software, AI software programs. See what they have to say about it as well, and then post on it. Talk to people about it. Be respectful. Talk to your local leaders, and voice your opinion. Members of cabinet, they all have government email addresses. Email them. This is important. Reiterate, be respectful. So anyways, Bill C9 criminalizes protected free speech and is unconstitutional. Remember that most of the same Liberal and Green Party House of Commons members voted in 2022 to declare the Emergency Act on peaceful protesters. This act criminalized protected constitutional rights. And even in 2024, with Judge Mosley, he overturned the Emergency Act, like what they deemed it. Anyways, he deemed it. Sorry, he didn't overturn. He deemed the declaration of the Emergency Act unlawful and unconstitutional. Like I was saying before, it was even implemented, and other people as well. And again, this is just like, I'm not smarter than anyone. Like, this is stuff that I've talked about to a lot of people, and we were all along the same lines. Like, this absolutely had violated human rights, like our constitutional rights. Right to free speech, right to peaceful assembly, right? And there's people that are working within government in the House of Commons that don't even know the Canadian Constitution. They can't get, like, you know what I mean? And so ask them these questions. Like, do you know anything about the Canadian Constitution? Call them out on it. Because you've been wrong before, multiple times. So the unconstitutional act turned innocent, I'm talking about the Freedom Convoy now. So anyways, this unconstitutional act turned innocent Canadians. I just want to see if I'm on mic. Okay, good. Unmute, I mean. This unconstitutional act turned innocent Canadians into criminals and persons of interest overnight. Multiple people were jailed, bank accounts frozen, passports taken away, solitary confinement, suspensions and charges in the courts for years. It was just crazy. And again, this is still ongoing. You know, a backlog that is unsustainable. Since 2023, with the adoption of more hate crimes acts, law enforcement are being diverted to respond to protected speech allegations using intimidation tactics and blatantly a two-tiered politicized enforcement. And 6 of 9 Supreme Court justices, oh, I said judges. Anyways, justices, not judges, but were appointed by Trudeau. Yeah, I forgot to correct that. I was corrected on that when someone read this post. I'm like, oh shit. Anyways, but anyway, you know what I mean by that. So there's also been a surge of non-Canadian citizens coming into the country permanently and non-permanently at unsustainable rates since 2020 and accelerated in 2023. The majority of the approximately 1.5 million annual non-permanent residents are shuffled into major cities. Our law enforcement cannot control the increase in major crimes, and whistleblowers admit this repeatedly. I get people from all over Canada that are telling me like just how in the city areas how crazy it's gotten and how there's not even a lot that they can do about it. And again, just like people are saying within the Conservative Party, um, people are getting posting bail immediately. Like we are like it's nonsensical. And so with these hate crimes, enforcement units that I've talked about now for over a year, at least maybe 2 years, it's millions of dollars for these units that now law enforcement are being diverted from like major crimes, breaking and entries, all of these things, to respond to again what can be perceived as a hate crime, and there's been thousands reported, and so again, like we cannot get to be at the levels where at the UK and in other areas of Europe where we're banning protected speech. Like, please, people, come on, and uh, and these law enforcement officers and this money could be used to actually manage actual crimes. Again, why are we criminalizing protected constitutional rights and freedoms and liberties when we're not even good at protecting people from being friggin' raped basically anymore at this point? And just come into my house and break in and take whatever you want. There's nothing I can do about it. You know, don't forget the safe. Yeah. Yes, another hawk wants to criminalize free speech with subjective details on what would be classified as, and it's just I went on from there, but I mean, would calling someone fat be considered a hate crime at some point? Like for symbols and speech and stuff like that. For symbols, will the would the Canadian flag be at some point be considered a hate crime, depending on where it's flown or worn? What about the pride flag? Again, this could go left and right here. Yeah, Stephen Guilbeault, traitor to Canada, just like Christy Freeland. Yeah, so resigned. You will not be missed. Okay, so that's it for X. A little longer than I expected, but I ramble. I'm sorry for that. Okay. More lies from Carney. Admits housing photo faked because they tried to deny it when people called it out. Barbara Ball also is one of the ones that called it out, and she was the one that was running against him in Nepean, and he still doesn't have a constituency there, by the way. And again, he knew that it was going to be overwhelmingly liberal voting in that area because of government and immigration. Like they largely vote liberal in these areas, and so of course he stole that area. And his family doesn't live there. I believe they live in New York. Correct me if I'm wrong. And yeah, took it away from Chandra area in a corrupt way, in a slimy way, and then anyway, he's a liar. Okay, so this is from Tucker Carlson. Regardless of what you think of him, this is interesting. Okay, so for months, the Wall Street Journal has held a story detailing the personal corruption of Andriy Yermak, the second most powerful man in Ukraine. Yermak has skimmed hundreds of millions in American tax dollars, so probably tens of millions of Canadian taxpayer dollars, meant for Ukraine aid. The journal's editors can prove that, but they're not. Instead, they're protecting Yermak. Why? Because Yermak is leading Ukraine's efforts to scuttle the Trump peace plan for Eastern Europe. The owners of the Wall Street Journal don't want peace with Russia. They want war. At the same time, the journal's editorial page has attacked the Trump administration for pushing a peace agreement. This is true corruption. Without informing its readers, the Murdoch family is using both sides of its newspaper to continue the wars with Russia. That's not the behavior of a news organization. It's the hallmark of an intel agency. Again, state-funded propaganda. And it's coming out. Oh my God. Oh, there we go. I'm on YouTube, so there's not a lot I can say, but you can read this from Uncommon Sense. So will Zelensky be forced to accept Trump's peace plan drafted by Steve Witkoff and Rubio? I don't know. Like some people are saying that it was possibly drafted by Russia or someone that like that was Russian. Could be someone that's Russian that's working within the American government, which would make sense. But anyway, the plan requires Kiev to accept Russia's de facto control over Crimea, Donetsk, and Luhansk. The front line in Kherson and Zaporizhia would be frozen, meaning Kiev would acknowledge Moscow's annexation. As a reward, Zelensky and his den of thieves will get a large-scale reconstruction program funded by 100 billion in European contributions and another 100 billion from frozen and stolen Russian assets. Russia isn't fully on board, and Putin said Russian forces are continuing their advance in Ukraine and will continue to press forward unless Ukraine agrees to a peace deal. Oh yeah, I think they're in Israel now, living there. Yep. Yeah. Connected to Netanyahu as well. So again, it's all right. Is anything else here? Alexandra Sukerman and Timur Mindich, Ukrainian oligarchs who embezzled hundreds of millions of dollars and have now fled to Israel to be free from international extradition. So many people dying that you just don't even care about. It's so infuriating to me as a veteran. And people are saying he's the Churchill of their time. Yeah, maybe. A degenerate who sold out his country to, oh my God. It's people in the deep state, people within like the banking industries and anyways, the education systems, wow. What Ukraine's Western friends have done to the country is nothing short of unconscionable. Step by step, they pushed it even closer to the abyss. First, by forcing the country to make a fateful civilizational choice between the West and Russia, a geopolitical ultimatum that culminated in the 2014 coup, splitting the nation in two and igniting a bloody civil war. Then by pressuring the Western installed proxy government to reject any diplomatic settlement, however reasonable. Next, by arming and de facto integrating Ukraine into NATO's military structures, thereby setting the country on the inevitable path of wars with Russia, suggesting that this was the desired outcome in some Western circles. Then, after Russia's invasion, by sabotaging every opportunity for peace, including the promising talks of early 2022, which is actually the truth. And so they were open to peace negotiations and deals. And then the US and other people from within high levels went to Ukraine and within days declared and continue to do so in the years that followed, despite the glaring reality that Ukraine could never recover its lost territories. And all of this in the cynical hope of using Ukraine as a pawn to weaken and bleed Russia at the cost of hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian lives. Though we can only hope a political settlement is reached as soon as possible, what the West and primarily the US has done to Ukraine will remain a tragedy of historic proportions. And I don't disagree with that. And I think I say the same thing about what's going on in Palestine. I think it's a genocide. And it doesn't mean that I think that Sharia law is something that is compatible with Christianity or with Canadian culture and values, and I think there are people that have been very radicalized in that area because of what's been going on now for many, many years. And I think it's by design by the likes of people like Netanyahu, again, that are profiting off of this friggin' grift and calling people cattle that they don't care about. And so yeah, that's why, anyway, it's just a mess. This is just an advisory. 4 men dressed as Canada Post workers held a BC family hostage for 13 hours and stole US 1.6 million in crypto. They waterboarded both parents and sexually assaulted their daughter. Oh my fucking God. One suspect, Zwing Boaz Chan, sentenced to 7 years. 7 years for doing that? Are you fucking kidding me? So this was from, I don't know how old this is. Tamara Leach, uh, for a peaceful protest, truly heroic act. The Crown wanted to give her 7 years. Two-tier justice system. What I'm saying is we're protecting criminal immigrants, which we should not be doing. Okay, like, and people that are part of the left, radical left, people that are committing crimes, that, attacking people at protests, targeting people that that are Christian conservative, or social media influencers on the right, or even libertarians, like actually targeting them and doxing them. It's becoming out of control, and nothing's done about it. Yeah, BC, man. David Eby or whatever his name is, again, like a terrible prime minister, terrible premier, and totally economically collapsing, spiritually collapsing his entire province. I love BC, and like a new trade deal. They're going to be going to through Washington instead of through BC. So much money could have been made off of that for BC, and anyways, not anymore. And still trying to again to abolish this new pipeline deal that would absolutely benefit all of Canadians, but it's because of his assets, and his priorities don't align with Canadians succeeding. So BC is teaching kindergartners queering the outdoors. Okay, and the minister's meltdown was absolute madness. This is British Columbia. Anyway.
When left-wing fanatics take over the union representing your province's teachers, well, you get queering outdoor education, the latest module made by the BCTF for kindergarten students. And I quote, colonization and white supremacy culture have worked in opposition in nature, in land theft, anti-Indigenous racism, resource exploitation, and seeing nature as objects from which to profit. As well, colonization has offered a pseudoscience narrative of binary gender as exemplified by the saying birds and bees. Did you catch that, Mr. Speaker? The birds and the bees, well, they're racist now. My question to the minister, does she agree with the BCTF that kids should be queering the outdoors?
Minister of Education.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. And I really have to begin by saying that it is truly such a shame that this member continues to use their place of privilege in this House.
Oh my God.
To ask these type of questions.
Oh my God, social justice.
We here on this side of the House believe that every student in every school should feel welcome. They should feel loved, and they should feel included.
Everyone.
No matter where they come from, who their parents are, what their race is, what their background is, what their gender is.
Including white.
And we're going to continue to stand up for that diversity here in BC.
Including Christian.
Because that's what makes us special. We are going to support children who are the most vulnerable in our schools, who are the most likely to self-harm, to commit suicide, to do damage. We are going to stand up for those kids. We are going to tell those kids we love them, we see them, and we support them. And I'm so disappointed that this member continues to use their position of privilege to bring these children down.
Children, all children matter. And this demonization that's been going on in the education systems is sinful. And we've got these leftist, radical, social justice warrior Karens that are so ignorant to reality. And it's not even large. I mean, it's their fault, but not their fault, because again, they're getting taught, also being brainwashed and indoctrinated into from the education systems, right? So they think that, because I have these degrees and stuff like that, when it's like gender fluid study, like things that have nothing to do with reality, respectfully speaking, objective data, measurable data, actual scientific data, can't define what a man or a woman is, etc. Like I don't understand. I don't understand how they like we need to literally fire these people now. This is getting out of control. And anyway, that's all I'll say about that. So annoying to hear. What else did I want to say about that? yeah, I'll leave that. So Ramanullah Lakanwal, I shared this yesterday. The Afghan who just ambushed and critically wounded two National Guardsmen in Washington, D.C., wasn't some random asylum seeker. He was literally a paid CIA partner enforcer. And so he was involved with the CIA and other government agencies in Afghanistan. And this has been confirmed. And I'll talk about the pipe bomber as well, but also CIA connections as well, and working with the CIA. And again, it's not a good look, CIA, right? When like your hands are in Vietnam, your hands are in Iran-Contra, your hands are in the JFK assassination, your hands are in 9/11, your hands are in this, your hands are in Thomas Matthew Crooks, possibly with at least CIA ranges that were ranges that were being utilized by him prior to the assassination attempt. That was where it was known to be where there were a lot of CIA officers that were also training at that same range. So again, and then even with oh my god, it's not gonna come to me. Anyway, the other guy that was found like off the fence at his I think it was his Mar-a-Lago golf course or whatever. He was also possibly connected to the CIA. And also went to Ukraine during this escalation, this war period, and was trying to get Afghan nationals to literally join the cause and stuff like that. I've shared videos on that, but I forget his name right now. But anyways, I've done a deep dive on him in the past, but again, I can't retain all information because it would be literally impossible. Pension funds. Yeah, I already talked enough about that. Oh, Margaret Thatcher. I freaking love her.
Are you surprised at how much interest there is in this country on things you have to say?
I'm very pleased. I don't know whether I'm surprised. I'm very pleased and grateful because we did take a different course in Britain. I think the course we took has been immensely beneficial to lovers of freedom and lovers of the American-British alliance. It's done great things for the world. I think that the center of freedom is this Atlantic community. It's not necessarily in Europe, it's this American, British, and one or two other nations in Europe. And I think people realized we had to fight for it. We did turn it around. But you do have to fight to keep freedom. Because there are always people who say, oh, give a little bit more power to government, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more. Then one day, you've got so many people employed by government that they have a vested interest in keeping more and more power in the hands of government and less in the hands of people. No, it shall not be. The governments are there to serve the liberties of the people, not to restrict them.
Yep.
Are you surprised at how much interest?
The governments are there to serve the liberties of the peoples, not to restrict them. Look what's happening now in Canada. And there are people, again, that like we're highly politicizing significant events. And again, because we have very leftist media, state-funded media that's very leftist and radical, they have been demonizing Christians and conservatives now for years, attacking them. Okay, and so you have people that are part of the LGBTQ plus community that literally believe that people that vote conservative are demonic, are fascists, are Nazis, hate gay people, like we don't support, like all of this stuff, right? When largely that's not the case at all. Again, I'm saying like there's extreme left, there is extreme right. There's a smaller faction within the conservative spectrum that are extreme. There's a lot more on the left, and again, there's even studies to prove that. And so yeah, and so like this narrative, right? So like when I talk to people that vote differently than I do, automatically, right? Like they believe that I'm some kind of like again like a fascist, racist, sexist, misogynist, all of this stuff. And I'm like, okay, first of all, I'm like more libertarian, but I think that we have like a communist socialist regime that's very radical and authoritarian right now, and they've been literally destroying our country from the inside out. And so obviously I don't want to vote for them. It has nothing to do with anything else, right? Other than that's very important. And again, they have been causing more harm with what they've been implementing and what they've been sharing than good. And so again, I am definitely not homophobic. I definitely believe that like there should be equal rights for people within the LGBT community. I've advocated for and shared videos of people who are gay. I have people within my family who are gay. I don't care. Like, I believe that they should have equal opportunities, equal rights. I don't believe that equal opportunities mean equal outcomes, and I don't believe that just because you are gay or lesbian that you should be automatically hired within major important key positions that should be based off of merit. Okay. And so, like, that's for everyone, right? Merit based, not based on anything else. And we've now created more laws within the Canadian government, this current regime, again, only within the last 10 years, where they specifically say within contracts on LinkedIn that I've shared, where they are excluding white people from these friggin' contracts. Okay, so then white males, and then it's white females, and then these are the people that they're hiring, right? And these are like hundreds of thousands of dollars a year contracts, right? And it's like, holy shit, you know what I mean? It's like, why don't you want the best, especially when it's taxpayers' money? You're obligated, actually, in fact. And so, yeah, so there's a lot of people, that are within the LGBT community that think that people that vote conservative hate them, want them to die. Again, not the case largely. And that's been increasing in the media and stuff like that as well. And you can see with all these protests and stuff like that, it's gotten out of control. And this is by design. We're too busy fighting from within to focus on what's actually happening, right? And then so you have, even with immigrants that are here, they think that people that vote conservative hate immigrants. No, we don't. Largely don't. Again, there's going to be people on the extreme right now. We're saying that in the last 5 years, especially, it is unsustainable. There is an increase in crime. There is a housing crisis. There are so many different reasons. Like, there's just so much. The hospital waits have gone through the roof. There are people that are exploiting these systems, these social systems that are in place, and taking lots of money off of Canadians a month and a year, and it's a grift, and putting so much money into people that are coming here, benefiting from our services, and then leaving and going back to their home countries and stuff like that as well. And so it's just wild to me. And so people think that we're all racist. That's not true. Just because we're unhappy with how things are going now, because it's way too much, especially for the given our population. Okay, yeah, we're at almost 40 million, but again, look at the major city centers, right? And this is where they're predominantly going, and it's replacing our culture, it's replacing our civilization. So, possibly, again, if it goes again on the trajectory they want it to go, people like Mark White, the Century 21 Initiative, and things like that. These are literally being put in place, and so again, it's fuel on the fire. And then with Indigenous peoples as well. And I've been saying this since 2021. It was not popular then. And so there's so much division and hatred being pushed within the media and by politicians. Even Justin Trudeau, like our friggin' leader, he's been like so divisive. And it creates radicals. It creates radicals. And it builds animosity. It elicits emotional responses in people, and a lot of conservative people, again, and Christians have been getting attacked. And so even with Indigenous people, with this residential school stuff that's going on, we still have not found the mass grave sites. And again, there's a lot that's being said about what happened when Europeans came to Canada. That is being told so friggin' incorrectly. Okay, and we do need to address the difference between immigrating. As opposed to settling, as opposed to being an explorer or a pioneer and building infrastructure out of nothing in austere conditions too, but I might add, and then actually just inheriting houses and things like that. So again, with this huge push, and now with these land acknowledgement rights that are being announced, or these land acknowledgements, I mean, that are being announced by, again, like largely leftist people, or forcing people to do that, even though they don't want to, and actually getting fired, even teachers getting fired for refusing to do this. Again, this is inciting more hatred and division, and it's targeted towards the conservatives. And so, again, just so much misleading information and incorrect information. And again, it's just politicizing these significant, again, like divisive topics. It's annoying. And Christian churches, for the last few years, I've said as well, there's been a lot of Christian churches that have been attacked, that have been targeted, that have been destroyed or set on fire. Conservatives and Christians getting doxxed, even though even people again that support largely these communities, except for when it comes to harming children like the major things when it comes to anyway. I hope people get what I'm saying.
Is in this country on things you have to say.
All right. That's it for the social media. Okay, so Redacted had on this guy like a day ago or so talking about Ukraine. And it's very interesting. And a lot of what this guy says is very well informed. And so I highly recommend people take a look at that. I might share a little bit of it, but I want to share Viva Fry. All right. I'll leave Viva Fry. All right. I'm not going to show the whole thing because I want to get into the moon landing video.
Steve Baker, allegedly in his expose that he published in The Blaze, identified the Jan 6 pipe bomber. I say I've never mentioned her name because I can't remember her name, and B, it's also irrelevant. Steve Baker put out a piece after having checked with legal. It was logical, relatively compelling, and raised some serious issues about the official narrative in any case. And his argument was that it was a Jan 6 Capitol Police officer who he identified by way of gait analysis, which is, in fact, a legitimate form of analysis. It's sort of like fingerprint. I don't know if it's more or less reliable than fingerprint in the criminal law industry, but it's a legitimate form of identifying someone based on their walk, based on their gait, which is how they walk and what limps they might have, whatever. And there's various ways of assessing gait, like if you can get cell phone footage, cell phone data, like your gyroscopic movements of your hips are very, very unique. So Steve Baker, by way of gait analysis, identified who he thinks is the culprit. He may be right, he may be wrong. One thing that's for certain, however, undisputed, even Julie Kelly acknowledged it, is that the person that Steve Baker identified as allegedly being the pipe bomber was the same person definitively, by all accounts, and I don't think it's disputed, was one of the Capitol Police officers who is seen firing on the protesters, the Jan 6, I say protesters for lack of a better word, firing on them with rubber bullets in a manner that was described as qualifying as unlawful use of deadly force because of where those bullets were being aimed. So I say, one way or another, I mean, the idea that like Steve Baker's going to get sued by the woman for defamation, it's like, all right, okay, it might happen. Who the hell knows? There thus far has not even been, as far as I know, a request for a retraction. But if Steve Baker's wrong, so be it. It's nonetheless the same woman who, based on analysis, is on footage, camera, photographs, unleashing what experts qualify as potentially lethal use of force on the crowd, and some would argue in order to incite the crowd into some form of retaliatory violence. Okay. I had on did not have on Steve Baker. He has not yet done many interviews off Blaze that I know of. I had on Kyle Seraphin, then I had on Julie Kelly. And Julie Kelly's argument was that it's not her, the person that Steve Baker identified, because what was the reason that she gave? That her explanation was that she hadn't seen the expert analysis of the gait, the gait analysis of the evidence. She hadn't seen it, except there was some that was disclosed: the limp, which was favoring the right foot; the height, 5'7", which is the same height as the pipe bomber, and some other issues of proximity. So Julie Kelly wasn't convinced, and Julie Kelly has her own theory, which is that the pipe bomb wasn't actually placed at the time the FBI says it was placed. It was actually placed the next day. According to Baker's theory, the pipe bomb would have had to have been placed on January 5th and not January 6th. Julie Kelly's theory is that the pipe bomb was placed on January 6th by the woman she believes did it, who she more or less identified, but I forget her name as well because I don't care about her name. But the one who claimed to have found it while she was going to do her laundry, Julie Kelly thinks that's suspicious, that story. So that's her theory. And the one thing I said to Julie is, like I said, we had this whole back and forth about how the FBI then cleared an individual person of interest too, who was the one taking pictures and took a picture of the very same dumpster where the bomb was found the next day. That individual was cleared by the very same corrupt FBI that we believe is behind the Fedsurrection. Julie believes that exoneration, and yet simultaneously doesn't even believe that FBI, or even the current FBI for that matter, as to their official timeline of events. Okay. CBS News puts out a story yesterday purporting to debunk Steve Baker's story. What's even more amazing about it, is that it's, more or less of an attempt to discredit Steve Baker's story. It actually is more of an attack on Tulsi Gabbard and the ODNI. Now, because I'm an idiot, where is the article? I'm going to have to pull up the article. I thought I had it in the book. CBS News, pipe bomber. Let's just get this right here. Oh, yes. How an innocent woman's name. Listen to this. And if you know the way CBS News works, it's not because now how an innocent woman's name was tied to the Jan 6 pipe bombs. Let's walk through this, shall we? By Jennifer Jacobs, Pat Milton, Artem Farhi. A federal security officer linked to a thwarted Jan 6 pipe bomb attack cleared her name by providing an alibi. This is not the Babylon Bee, people. This is real. A federal security officer linked to a thwarted Jan 6 pipe bomb attack cleared her name by providing an alibi. Video of her playing with her puppies at the time the devices were placed, sources told CBS News. We're going to get back to that in a second, people. This was 5 years ago. She would have allegedly have just been cleared within the last 3 weeks since Steve Baker posted the story. She would have been cleared based on a video of her playing with her puppies at the time the devices were placed 5 years ago. So the questions that I have, which I would love the FBI to answer. First of all, the FBI has yet to formally confirm this story. So that's another question I've actually asked via social media. The FBI rapid response is very quick on responding to certain stories. Can they confirm or deny this? But let's just set aside the FBI confirm this. The idea is that she cleared herself by providing an alibi. She was playing with her puppies at the time the bombs were placed. Okay. Does she have the same cell phone that she had 5 years ago? Is my question. I don't know, and this is, a first world luxury. I don't know anybody on earth who's got a 5-year-old phone. And I'm not saying this is a snob. I'm sure there are, actually I should say that. I know a few people who might have a phone that's 5 years old. I don't know many people who have a phone, dangerous sight, that is 5 years old. Let me just go back. We're going to come back to that in a second because I don't know what the heck just happened here. CBS News. Is this a real? So that's one question. She has the same phone from 5 years ago? The other question is, how do they check the metadata on that video? The third question is, where was that video? Is that video posted on social media? Is that video still on her phone? It's one thing to have the same phone from 5 years ago. There are data issues. I mean, I go through 1 terabyte every 4 months or 5 months on my phone. The excuse is laughably insane. When were the pipe bombs placed? According to the FBI, it was like, I want to say 7 o'clock. Might have been 17. It was the evening before on January 5th in the early evening. Okay, let's get back to the article because it's hilarious. All right. The FBI has now ruled her out as a suspect in the 2021 plot, according to 3 sources, but only after her name circulated on social media and platforms and conservative news sites. Now, the 3 sources don't mention if it's FBI as one of the 3 sources. It could very well be her lawyer, her mother, and her best friend. I don't know. I'm just making that up. It doesn't say that it was confirmed by the FBI. How an innocent woman's name came to be publicly linked to the unexploded pipe bombs is a question that has raised concerns among some senior officials of the Trump administration. CBS News is not naming the security officer or her workplace. Well, this is public knowledge that the person Steve Baker identified as the potential pipe bomber was hired by the CIA. This was even discussed with Julie Kelly, who acknowledged that whether or not this identified person is the person who planted the pipe bombs, Julie Kelly and I both agree that she violated the civil rights of the protesters by using potentially lethal force on them by firing her rubber bullets and pepper spray at above shoulder levels of the crowd. They won't identify where she works? Well, that's some great effing journalism, CBS. How about you say that she went from Capitol Police to the CIA? Or whether or not she works at the upper levels with Ratcliffe, or she's a, what do they call it? A campus security at the CIA. She went to the CIA. Oh, you know what? You don't want to identify that because you don't want to be unfair to the person. First of all, even Baker's article said, 90 some odd percent certainty. And when I was discussing, it's like, all right, well, that's 8% chance that he's wrong. They don't want to identify her workplace, and they cloak that as responsible journalism when in reality, ignoring the fact that the person who, pipe bomber or not, fired on the protesters and is now employed at the CIA is relevant for everything. Federal agencies she protects declined to comment. So federal agencies she protects declined to comment. So the CIA refused to comment. As far as we know, the FBI hasn't commented. Listen to this. Multiple sources said the unit overseen by the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, drafted a memo. Now we sort of understand how much more credible. Like they purport to debunk Steve Baker's story. Now we understand how much more credible it actually is, because whether or not it originated within the DNI, or whether or not Baker got his lead from the DNI.
There were apparently, again, like I've talked about, like the pipe bomb being planted by someone absolutely from within the government, unfortunately, and so I'm hoping that more comes out of this. I think that people get covered. Like I think that like it's all covered, and unless they slip up and make mistakes. And so it wouldn't surprise me at all if this is actually the woman. And then again, even with like the sniffer dogs, there is a strong argument because apparently they captured video or photo. I forget now. I'm gonna have to look more into this, but where it was in the morning. I think it was before 9 a.m., but they were out and they were close to where these alleged pipe bombs were planted, within feet, and then and they were found, retrieved early in the afternoon, shortly after 1 p.m. in the afternoon, 1 or 7 or something like that. And so they found 2 pipe bombs, and then they stopped there. And so why did they do that? If it's 1 pipe bomb, okay. When you see 2, then you have to automatically assume that there's going to be possibly more, and so it's just very interesting to me. So to me, it would lead me to believe that they the biggest thing that pops out to me is like you would have already known that there was only 2. Like I've done searches before, in the military, etc. It's you clear you would not stop, and so if anyone can explain that to me, that'd be great. And so that was the strong argument for the possibility that it was planted afterwards. But again, this could be a cover to cover for this woman. So yeah, and if that's the case, then she's a traitor to her country and she should be in jail. Look at the January 6th protesters that were in jail for friggin' years. That almost like we're going to be in there for like over 10 years or plus. Peaceful protesters, out of your friggin' mind. No, this girl should be in jail. They lied. They planted evidence to corroborate the narrative that they wanted to push. There was extreme overreach here. Crisis actors, role players, deep state plants, agitators, etc. And they harmed a lot of people. And life-changing for the rest of their lives. These people that were in jail and charged and fired and you name it. Like what they went through, like that's never going to go away.
It seems that the DNI drafted a memo suggesting this person might have been the person. Multiple sources said, okay, Tulsi Gabbard drafted a memo identifying the woman and describing allegations that she had placed the explosive devices outside the Democrat and Republican Party offices. The memo was written after ODNI was made aware of allegations from an outside source, an ODI spokesperson said. ODNI officials said the agency received a tip from a person affiliated with a media organization about a potential criminal wrongdoing. So it might be that Baker thinks he broke the case, reaches out to the ODNI, and they draft a memo potentially identifying this person. All right. Copy of the unfinished memo was given to senior staff at the security officer's workplace, sources said. It also circulated among a few Trump administration officials, building expectations that the nearly 5-year-old case might be solved. But the memo caught some officials at the FBI, Justice Department, and White House off guard, the sources said. What's interesting is, you recall in the Charlie Kirk assassination, Kash Patel was alleged to have gotten angry at Joe Kent and Tulsi Gabbard for investigating a potential terrorist link to the Charlie Kirk assassination. So this is not implausible on its face. It's coming from CBS News, so I'm inclined to think everything they have to say is a lie. but this is not implausible based on other reporting of other incidents that we've heard. ODNI oversees the nation's foreign intelligence gathering, has limited domestic investigative authorities. The FBI is leading the pipe bomb investigation. A short time after the unfinished memo began to circulate, the conservative news outlet The Blaze published details similar to those in the draft, including the woman's full name. The November 8 Blaze news article claimed that it had pinpointed the woman after a review of video evidence and gait analysis. Software matched her walking pattern to the gait of the person shown in the surveillance footage, who authorities suspect planted the bombs outside the party offices January 5th. Blaze News said its work has been confirmed by several intelligence sources. Several sources told CBS News that the classified draft memo, classified, doesn't mean it's accurate, it's classified, which was on ODNI letterhead, was written by Paul McNamara, excuse me, who's the head of the Directors Initiative Group, which is tasked with providing transparency and accountability. Spokesperson Olivia Coleman said ODNI followed its obligations to report information received concerning the alleged activities of a member of the intelligence community to that person's employing agency. After a whistleblower came forward with an allegation, ODNI documented the accusation and lawfully reported it, fulfilling our legal duty to alert appropriate agencies when alleged potential security concerns are brought to our attention. Coleman said there was no predetermined conclusions or assessments made, and every action taken was done so in consultation with legal counsel. Blaze became the subject of extensive media coverage and discussions on social media, especially among supporters of Mr. Trump. So the bombing planting incident is one of the lingering mysteries surround. It's a mystery, my ass. ODNI officials also said the draft memo hadn't been reviewed or approved by agency leadership. It's amazing what they're trying to do is sow discord now among the ODNI and make them look incompetent, make them look like there's internal conflict. Sources said this situation and others were viewed internally by some senior administration officials as interfering in areas that were beyond the purview of the National Intelligence Director's Office. Axios reported, was this one? Yeah. Axios reported in September that Justice Department officials believed ODNI had hindered their case against former CIA Director John Brennan. New York Times in October reported that ODNI had accessed FBI investigative files regarding to Charlie Kirk. So this is the debunking, by the way. Understand everything that we just read in that article. 95% of it was a hit piece on the ODNI. The debunking was a video of the alleged person identified by Steve Baker playing with her puppies at the time the bombs were allegedly placed. I'm not privy to any internal.
So for me, it's the bomb sniffing dogs that I keep on focusing on, and the fact that they stopped after finding 2 bombs. And so I was just trying to look, because I like to follow up. I like to be thorough on these videos, even though they get a little longer. But the dog sniffing team. So I threw it on some software programs here. Just share what they said. Which one was the best one? Just 1 second here. Okay, I'll just go off of Google first. Okay. Bomb sniffing dogs pipe bomb January 6th. And if anyone has any videos or any photos of these teams doing the searches on the morning of January 6th, please give it to me, don189@protonmail.com. Okay, so bomb sniffing dogs failed to detect the 2 pipe bombs placed near the Democratic National Committee, DNC, and Republican National Committee, RNC, headquarters on January 5th and 6th, 2021, primarily due to security sweep failures and logistical issues, rather than a problem with the dog's capabilities. Placement location: the bombs were left in out-of-the-way locations, one in a bush near garage entrance ramp at the DNC, the other near the RNC, which were not part of the standard designated sweep paths. I know this is redundant to people, I'm sorry. But again, sweep protocol failures. A report by the House Administration Committee found that despite 2 Secret Service canine units sweeping the DNC area the morning of January 6th, the exterior team did not check the specific bush where the bomb was hidden. The site agent also reportedly did not order the canine teams to sweep the entire exterior perimeter. Very interesting. So maybe a case of deliberately not properly doing your friggin' jobs. like these Secret Service people, and there's so much surveillance in these areas. I find it hard to believe that you wouldn't have video footage of them doing the sweeps that morning. Like, this is one of the most heavily surveyed areas in the U.S., right? So the bombs were placed allegedly the evening before, between 7:30 p.m. and 8:30, as per the footage where we're claiming that woman is the one that placed them, and were not discovered until around 1 p.m. the next day. The extended time where they were in place before law enforcement arrived on scene reduced the chances of immediate detection. Okay, security sweeps were conducted ahead of Vice President-elect Kamala Harris's visit to the DNC. So anyways, it goes on from there, but I asked, is there photo or video proof of the dog search? So this is from Google. There's no publicly released photo or video proof of the bomb-sniffing dogs conducting their search at the DNC or RNC locations on January 6, 2021. The visual evidence released by the FBI in the ongoing investigation consists entirely of surveillance footage of the suspect placing the bomb pipes the evening before, on January 5th, 2021. This footage has been widely shared to solicit tips from the public. So again, how do you have this footage but you don't have of the sweep teams? The released footage focuses on the suspect's movements, appearance, and the placement of the devices. Okay, so yeah, so, and if they're gonna keep covering for people like they're doing for, like, even with the Diddy trials and with friggin' Comey and these friggin' criminals and Letitia James, all these friggin' criminals that should be in jail and are not. Come on. Okay, so a House Administration Committee report noted the security sweep failures, stating the K-9 team at the DNC did not check the specific bush where the bomb was located. And so I read that report, and again, there's really nothing in there. And so what they're saying that this was just by them saying that it happened, again, people that might be corrupt and lying to us anyways, that were part of this, they're the ones that are saying, like, oh, there was a sweep done. So we have to take them at their word? No, we don't trust you. You have proven to us that we can't trust you. So no, show us the proof. And if there is proof, I'll keep digging. I thought I did see photos, but I could be wrong. Again, it's been a few years. It's been almost 5 years. Okay, so the bombs were found by individuals. Yeah, we already know that. Okay, so it's information about the K-9 sweep teams comes in from internal reports and congressional testimony rather than public video. That's it, like just by word of mouth. I don't like that anymore. An area is not covered. Again, just doing such a shitty job these days. I don't understand it. Like when I was in, like things were like run completely differently. Like I think that we're devolving as a society, and people, like, skill sets, experiences, standards have declined so bad. And this is what happens when you lower standards and you introduce woke DEI policies instead of being based on merit, physical fitness, all of these things, friggin' common sense. Like, if you can't tell me what, like, the differences between a man and a woman. Anyway, again, not to hate on that, but it's just frustrating as a woman. Moon landings. So yeah, I was Blaze debunked. I don't know, but I don't trust anything that comes out of that friggin' office anymore. Oh, here it is. Sorry, it took me a little while. I have so many tabs up. Okay, so this is from Free Your Mind videos. Conspiracy theory, did we land on the moon? Did we? Did we not? UFC here, I did not like it or unlike it yet, so I don't know. And so watch this together and see what you guys think.
The following program deals with a controversial subject. The theories expressed are not the only possible interpretation. Viewers are invited to make a judgment based on all available information. Tonight,
liftoff. We have a liftoff.
We investigate the most extraordinary event of the 20th century.
It's one small step for man.
Man landing on the moon.
One giant leap for mankind.
But believe it or not, some people say it never happened.
This whole thing was a fake.
Decide for yourself as we explore the evidence.
The Eagle has landed.
Analyze official government photos.
What a ride, what a ride.
Examine the films.
The flag flaps on the moon where there's no atmosphere.
And hear the testimony of one former astronaut who's not afraid to speak his mind.
NASA could have covered it up.
Could the government have orchestrated the deception of the century?
NASA could have pulled off the greatest hoax of all time.
You be the judge. On Conspiracy Theory, did we land on the moon?
On July 16, 1969, America held its breath.
10, 9, ignition sequence start. 6, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Apollo 11 blasted into space, beginning its 250,000-mile journey to the moon. During their 8-day voyage, the Apollo 11 astronauts saw spectacular views of the Earth, floated in a weightless environment, and supposedly went where no man had gone before.
Guys looking good, down a half. Lights on, picking up some dust. 4 forward, drifting to the right a little. Contact light. Okay, engine stop. We copy you down, Eagle. Listen, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
But did it? Did they really land on the moon? Most of us think so. Millions of people watched on television as the lunar lander touched down, and these unforgettable
I'm here in the background if anyone has any questions.
words were spoken.
That's one small step for man. One giant leap for mankind.
But even today, there are those who claim that believing in man's one small step requires one giant leap of faith. Bill Casing was an analyst and engineer at Rocketdyne, the company that designed the Apollo rockets.
There were many problems that evolved during the 60s that led people to believe that we were never going to make it to the moon.
Three decades ago, when the world watched Apollo's lunar landings, Bill Casing was watching too. But what he saw on television, combined with his experiences at Rocketdyne, made him a skeptic.
The whole thing then seemed phony to me. I think it was an intuitive feeling that what was...
This was like 3 decades roughly afterwards. The faked moon landings they alleged happened, which it didn't, but it happened on the 20th of July, 1969. And so this would make this to be in the late 90s, early 2000s. So like almost 25 years ago, at least.
Being shown was not real.
As he studied the footage more closely, he was shocked to find several inconsistencies. Casing observed that despite the clarity of deep space, the stars were missing from the black lunar sky. He saw the American flag waving, even though there is no air on the moon. And he discovered that there was no blast crater beneath the lunar lander, where its powerful rocket engine had fired. This evidence convinced Casing that we never sent a man to the moon. But NASA dismisses these charges.
There are always going to be people who believe some outlandish theories, and the notion that we somehow were able to fake the lunar missions is pretty outlandish.
As outlandish as it might seem, it has been estimated that as many as 20% of Americans believe we never went to the moon. But how could anyone think that one of the greatest moments in human history is a hoax? Is it really possible that NASA deceived the world? According to a former astronaut, it's entirely possible.
Regarding the Apollo mission, I can't say 100% for sure whether these men walked on the moon.
Brian O'Leary was a NASA astronaut in the 1960s and served as a science advisor during the Apollo moon missions.
It's possible that NASA could have covered it up just in order to cut corners and to be the first to allegedly go to the moon.
Was getting to the moon first so important that our government would consider faking it? To find the answer, we have to go back 40 years, to a time when America and the Soviets were locked in a struggle for world domination.
People assumed that the nation that won the space race would win the Cold War. We defined that as being first to the moon. It was a time of more or less national hysteria.
On October 4th, 1957, the Soviets terrified America when they sent Sputnik, the world's first satellite, into orbit.
The New York Times had to publish an article explaining to Americans that it did not carry nuclear bombs that could be dropped on the city from that altitude.
The American public's fear of nuclear annihilation intensified as Russia took the lead in the space race.
House Speaker announced in Congress that we may be headed for extinction.
Many feared that the Soviet Union's ultimate goal was to put a missile base on the moon. Meanwhile, America's space program was having difficulty even getting off the ground.
The chances of getting to the moon and returning safely to Earth were something like 0.0017%. In other words, virtually an impossibility.
What actually happened, in my mind, is that during the 60s, they said, if you can't make it, fake it.
But if the Apollo missions were fake, how was this monumental hoax accomplished? According to Casing, the launch of Apollo's Saturn V rocket was real. It just never sent astronauts to the moon.
The astronauts were launched with the Saturn V. Then, in order to account for their disappearance, they simply orbited the Earth for 8 days. And in the interim, they showed these fake pictures of the astronauts on the moon. But on the 8th day, the command capsule separated from the vehicle and descended to Earth, as of course was shown in films.
This theory inspired the 1978 movie Capricorn 1, in which the government attempts to fool the world by faking a mission to Mars.
We do not claim this planet in the name of America. We claim it in the name of all the people of the planet Earth.
The Apollo footage is strikingly similar to the scenes in Capricorn 1. Producer Paul Lazarus suggests that the film's plot line could be more fact than fiction.
I believe, had they wanted to, that NASA could indeed have pulled off the greatest hoax of all time, never sent anyone to the moon, and recreated it in a television studio. And I believe it could have been done at that time. The technology was in place.
The pudding is solid. Surface seems powdery.
Surface is fine and powdery. I can pick it up loosely with my toe.
What we put up on the screen was our own simulated version of whatever we could do within a $4.8 million budget.
But with NASA's $40 billion budget, Casing believes they had the resources to pull off a hoax if they couldn't make it to the moon.
The reason I believe that NASA and the government faked the moon landing was basically it was technically impossible to do it. And they simply had to come up with some sort of alternative that they felt the public would believe.
Casing theorizes that the lunar landings were actually filmed in Nevada's high desert, at the top secret military base known as Area 51.
Area 51 is one of the most heavily guarded facilities in the United States. If you went in and tried to get some information, you could be shot and killed without any warning.
Russian spy satellite photos of Area 51 reveal not only a series of hangars that resemble movie sound stages, but also barren moon-like areas which coincidentally are covered with craters. Compare this photo of a lunar crater allegedly taken from the moon's orbit by Apollo 10 with this satellite photo of a crater at Area 51. Even astronauts acknowledge the similarity of the terrain.
It has a stark beauty all its own. It's like much of the high desert of the United States.
Could billions of people really have been fooled into thinking the Nevada desert was the moon? Casing believes it's possible, and maybe the real reason Area 51 is so heavily guarded.
This is a very secret base, and with good reason, because undoubtedly the moon sets are still there.
And if they are, no one's getting a look at them anytime soon.
Up next.
Tranquility Base here.
If the lunar module landed with 10,000 pounds of thrust, why is there no blast crater? Plus, was this footprint really made on the moon? And later, 10 astronauts die under strange circumstances. How far could the conspiracy reach? Find out when Conspiracy Theory returns.
We've all been led to believe that on July 20th, 1969, the Lunar Excursion Module, also known as the LEM, carried American astronauts to the surface of the moon. But could it have simply been a prop lowered by wires onto a movie set? Bill Casing says that this may explain the absence of engine noise in the official NASA footage.
The noise level of a rocket engine is up into the 140, 150 decibel range. In other words, enormously loud. How would it be possible to hear astronauts' voices against the background of a running rocket engine?
Picking up some dust. 30 feet, 2.5 down. Straight shadow. 4 forward, drift into the right a little. Contact light. Okay, engine stop.
Is this evidence that the footage is actually fake? A sequence shot in a controlled environment here on Earth? Just months before this historic landing, a prototype LEM was flight tested at Ellington Air Force Base. While NASA cameras record the test flight, Neil Armstrong struggles to control the unwieldy craft. Then, at approximately 300 feet, the lander flies wildly out of control. At the last second, Armstrong ejects. And floats to safety. If the lander was so unstable and difficult to fly in the controlled environment of Earth, then how could the LEM land 6 times flawlessly in the alien environment of the moon?
The LEM had a single engine mounted dead center, and then they had little push jets, thruster jets, a couple of them up on top. This was supposed to control their attitude as they came down. Well, I'll tell you a secret. The instant you moved your tail in that cabin an inch, you would change the load pattern, it would begin to tilt, and it would start that thing spinning.
The arguments that have been arrayed on the side of those who believe that the lunar landings were a hoax are very elaborate and have to be to support a theory like this. In the end, there's one set of evidence that is irrefutable, and that is that there are footprints, boot prints, still on the lunar surface.
But conspiracy theorists say that the footprints themselves are suspicious.
The surface appears to be very fine-grained as you get close to it. It's almost like a powder.
To have a powerful rocket engine blast the surface of the moon, blasting away all of the dust, and then find footprints surrounding the lunar lander, that to me would be an impossibility.
Photo after photo reveals that the lunar surface surrounding the LEM is covered with footprints. But Casing says there's something even more difficult to explain.
The fact that there's no blast crater under the LEM is one of the most conclusive pieces of evidence that I find supporting the hoax.
In fact, no sign of a blast crater is visible for any of the 6 lunar landings. But LEM specialist Paul Fiel says he can explain why the lunar module left no crater when landing on the moon.
The amount of thrust that you need coming out of the bottom of the descent engine is about 1,500, 2,000 pounds of thrust. And all that does is just push dust away. There's no burning or anything like that.
Yet NASA's own scientific illustrations clearly depict a blast crater.
Then there's one other point. If they had truly landed on the moon, this dust would have then descended on the lunar lander, on the foot pads, and we find not a trace of dust on the foot pads. When I discovered that alone, I said, no way am I looking at a lunar lander that landed on the moon.
Could it be that the LEM was just a prop on a giant lunar movie set?
When Armstrong said, that's one small step for man and one giant leap for mankind, the footprint that he made could have easily been made in Area 51.
Casing points out that the LEM's departure from the lunar surface is even more suspicious.
In the footage of the ascent stage going up, what you don't see is an exhaust plume coming out of the rocket engine nozzle.
What a ride, what a ride.
But what do we see? We see the ascent stage suddenly pop up without any exhaust plume whatsoever, as though it were jerked up by a cable.
Is this evidence of a conspiracy? Was the government capable of such a massive cover-up?
To propose that this was all faked and a hoax, they have to say that every piece of evidence, that every physical scientific test that one could offer to support the reality of the lunar landings, they have to say that all of those are fake.
I would say that my conviction that Apollo was a fake was really not according to one specific piece of evidence, but it was cumulative. This whole thing was a fake.
Coming up.
We're getting a picture on the TV.
If there's no air on the moon, why is this American flag waving? Plus, could these official NASA photos have been doctored?
All of the photographs were faked.
And later, is it possible for humans to have survived the deadly radiation in deep space? When Conspiracy Theory continues.
If the moon landings were actually filmed on a movie set, then where's the evidence? According to David Percy, an award-winning filmmaker and photographer, the proof is in NASA's own lunar photos and video.
Our research suggests that images of the Apollo landings are not a true and accurate record. In our view, the Apollo pictures were faked. Many of the images are replete with inconsistencies and anomalies.
In fact, Percy claims that when examined, these images suggest that man never went to the moon at all. This famous scene of man taking his first steps on the lunar surface is one of the most recognizable in history. But why are such important images so grainy and hard to see?
And we're getting a picture on the TV. Hope you got a good picture, huh?
NASA claims it's the result of 1960s technology.
If you go back and look at it, the Apollo 11 mission was some pretty awful video by today's standards. These were ghostly images. It just did not look very real at all. And that was a function of the transmitter at the time, the camera at the time that we had available to us to fly on Apollo 11.
But investigative journalist Bart Sabrell believes that NASA intentionally made the images hard to see.
NASA orchestrated the hoax in a very unique way through television.
They had one picture, which they completely controlled, black and white, grainy, that convinced everybody we were on the moon. We had no reason to doubt it. They had complete reins over the pictures, over the sound. I mean, sad to say, it was easier than people believe.
But despite the lack of clarity, conspiracy theorists see evidence suggesting that these images were staged.
It's absolutely unreal.
Although it appears that the astronauts are moving in the moon's gravity, which is 1/6 that of the Earth, Percy notes that when the speed of the film is doubled, the astronauts appear to be running as if in Earth's gravity. Also, when the footage of the lunar rover is doubled in speed, it looks as if it's driving here on Earth. But there's another reason some believe the Apollo missions were shot on Earth. If there is no air or wind on the moon, why is this American flag waving?
The fact that the flag flaps on the moon where there's no atmosphere means that there must have been a little blast of wind out in Area 51 where they shot this.
Could these questionable images simply be the result of astronauts struggling to plant the flag into the lunar surface? Or is there more going on?
Yeah, there is some footage of the flag moving without anyone interfering with it as well. So like that's not a good video to use, in my opinion, because
Than meets the eye. What about the still photography? Some say the design of the bulky spacesuits would have made it extremely difficult for the astronauts to operate their chest-mounted cameras. The man who designed these cameras is Jan Lundberg.
Once on the moon, on the lunar surface, in the dress, in the light support system, you couldn't see the camera. They couldn't bend their head that far down. They had no viewfinder. They had to aim by moving their body.
Click. Click.
If the cameras were so difficult to manipulate, how were thousands of photos taken with crystal clarity and precise framing?
The pictures that we see that allegedly were taken on the moon are absolutely perfect.
But with closer examination, Casing says flaws begin to emerge.
Unfortunately, errors were made which are now being discovered.
Conspiracy theorists point out that lighting is a major flaw in the lunar photos. Case in point, on the moon, the astronauts' only source of light was the sun.
They had no extra lighting, no flashes or things like that.
Yet in this photograph from Apollo 14, the shadows are cast in different directions, suggesting multiple light sources.
The shadows cast by the rocks in the foreground should have been east-west, like the LEM shadow.
And in this photo from Apollo 17, again the shadows are pointing in different directions.
Outside in sunlight, shadows always run parallel with one another. So the shadows will never intersect.
Conspiracy theorists say it's not just the shadows that indicate the use of additional lights, but what has been photographed in the shadows. For example, here's an astronaut who descends into a huge shadow cast by the lunar module. Yet his entire body is still visible. How is it that he is not shrouded in darkness? Here's the same maneuver from another Apollo mission. Again, the astronaut is brightly lit in what is obviously dark shadow. And in this picture, the sun is directly behind the astronaut. His figure should be a silhouette. Yet even the smallest characteristics of his suit are recognizable.
It seems like he's standing in the spotlight. And I can't explain that. That escapes me. Why?
And finally, in this picture with the sun behind the lunar module, the front of the craft is clearly visible. The words United States are crisp and clear. How could these backlit pictures be so detailed?
It's because there's more than one light source, which means they're not on the moon.
But NASA simply dismisses these arguments.
There are a number of claims that the pictures taken by Apollo astronauts were faked. And there are so many, it would be an exercise in futility to go off and try to answer all of those.
But the questions continue. Why do some of these images shot at different times and different places appear to have identical backgrounds? These two photos seem to have the same mountain backdrop, yet the lunar module is only present in one of them. Seemingly impossible, since the LEM never moved and its base remained even after the mission.
What a ride, what a ride.
Some suggest the same artificial backdrop was used when shooting two entirely separate pictures. Background discrepancies are also apparent in the lunar video.
The best evidence are some pictorial anomalies in the photographic record of the trip to the moon. There is one for Apollo 16 where the same shot, the same hill, appears in 2 different days.
This tape was shot on what was reported to be the first of Apollo 16's lunar excursions.
But it couldn't pick a better spot.
And this video was from the next day at a different location.
That is the most beautiful sight.
NASA claims the second location was 2.5 miles away. But when one video is superimposed over the other, the locations appear identical.
The conspiracy theorists see that as evidence that we didn't go to the moon, that it was staged, and the opposite point of view is that it's a case of bad editing.
It's absolutely unreal.
Conspiracy theorists claim that even closer examination of the photos suggest evidence of doctoring. For reference, crosshairs were permanently etched into the lunar cameras, so they would have to appear on top of every image. But in this photo, a crosshair is behind a part of the lunar rover.
This situation is impossible and has to be the result of technical manipulation and doctoring of the image.
And in this photo from Apollo 11, the equipment in the foreground is covering the crosshair, not behind it. And in another from Apollo 12, the American flag is covering one crosshair and the astronaut is covering the other. When presented with these questionable photos and videos, NASA refutes the conspiracy theories.
Some range from incredibly complicated to incredibly goofy. There are arguments that are wrong optically, they're wrong physically, they're wrong scientifically, they're wrong historically. There's a great deal of claptrap that is sort of woven in to these arguments.
But despite what NASA says, conspiracy theorists still insist that Apollo was a hoax.
When I looked at all the pictures and all the footage, I'm absolutely convinced, I bet my life on it, that we didn't go to the moon. I know for a fact that we didn't.
Coming up next, tragedy strikes the Apollo program.
The program could be stopped dead in its tracks.
3 astronauts die in a pre-launch simulation. But was it an accident?
He was going to blow the whistle on the whole project.
And later, could the astronauts have survived a trip into deep space?
Before they got 1/2 to the moon, they would have picked up a death dose of radiation.
Next, on Conspiracy Theory.
If what conspiracy theorists say is true, how could NASA perpetrate such a widespread hoax without someone from the inside blowing the whistle? Virgil Gus Grissom was selected as one of the original 7 astronauts. A family man and a veteran of several space flights, he was a national hero and was likely to be the first man to walk on the moon. But Grissom was also an outspoken critic of the space program and was quoted as saying, "Someone's going to get killed." Unfortunately, Grissom's worst fears were soon realized. On January 27, 1967, 2 years before the first moon landing, Grissom and his crew boarded the Apollo 1 capsule for a full-scale simulation. The problems began almost immediately. First, the capsule's communication systems failed.
You copy? No, I didn't read you, Chuck, at all. I can't read you, Chuck. You want to try the phone? Hey, how do I get the moon? We can't pass between 3 buildings. I can't hear a finger's width.
Suddenly, the capsule burst into flames with the astronauts sealed inside. Tragically, Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee lost their lives before ever leaving the launch pad. Gus Grissom's family believes the Apollo 1 fire was no accident.
I think it was intentionally sabotaged by someone. It's been a question in my mind, what was found in the accident investigation and how was that handled? Was the CIA involved or whoever? But it was done intentionally.
Grissom's family doesn't know who was responsible for his death or why it happened. But they say NASA knows the truth.
Gus gave his life for this program, and I feel like that it is up to NASA to come forward and give us a direct answer to what really happened.
Were Gus Grissom and the Apollo 1 astronauts victims of a tragic accident? Or were they intentionally silenced because they knew too much? We may never know. The cause of the fire is still a mystery, and the capsule remains locked away at a military base. But Grissom wasn't the only Apollo critic to meet with a suspicious and untimely death. Thomas Ronald Barron was a safety inspector during Apollo 1's construction. After the fire, Barron testified before Congress that the Apollo program was in such disarray that the United States would never make it to the moon. He claimed his opinions made him a target.
Has there been any pressure on you by NASA?
Nothing. We were, my wife and I were somewhat harassed at home when this first thing broke some time back, but it's gone away now.
As part of his testimony, Barron submitted a 500-page report detailing his findings.
There was a real fear that the program could be stopped dead in its tracks.
Then exactly 1 week after he testified, Barron's car was struck by a train. Barron, his wife, and stepdaughter were killed instantly.
I believe that Thomas Ronald Barron was murdered because he had the truth to tell about the Apollo project.
Barron's report mysteriously disappeared, and to this day, it has never been found. But the Apollo program continued, and so did the string of untimely deaths. Between 1964 and 1967, a total of 10 astronauts lost their lives in freak accidents. These deaths accounted for an astonishing 15% of NASA's astronaut corps.
To keep something that's alive wrapped up and covered over, you've got to eliminate all the people that can talk about it.
Could the government have gone this far to pull off such an elaborate hoax? NASA says it's impossible.
There were probably 250,000 people who were directly involved in the Apollo program, and another 500,000 people beyond that. 750,000 people can't keep a secret like that. That's just not going to happen.
But Bart Sabrell insists that most NASA employees knew nothing of the deception.
Very few people at NASA knew. The thing is so departmentalized. You got the person building the bolts in Houston, or doing this in Seattle, or doing this in Florida. No one knows the full picture. So, you had no one seen the full picture of anything except a handful of people.
If the conspiracy theorists are right, and only a few people knew the whole story, then the truth may remain buried forever.
When we return, could the astronauts have survived the deadly radiation of space?
Getting them past the radiation belt would have been impossible.
And a Russian cosmonaut breaks his silence when conspiracy theory returns.
Suspicious deaths, evidence of doctored photos, and flags waving in the airless vacuum of space are not the only reasons to doubt that we ever went to the moon. Some say the astronauts could never even have survived the trip.
The reason why they couldn't go to the moon is because of a phenomenon that few people know about called the Van Allen radiation belts.
500 miles above the Earth, these bands of intense radiation surround our planet and are thousands of miles thick.
Any human being traveling through the Van Allen belt would have been rendered either extremely ill or actually killed by the radiation within a short time thereafter.
Other than the Apollo missions, no other manned space flight has attempted to pass through this deadly radiation.
Every manned mission in history, Gemini, Mercury, Skylab, the Space Shuttle, has been below the radiation belt, all except going to the moon.
To protect the astronauts, the
This was from the
capsule would have
90s.
needed 6 feet of lead shielding, according to physicist Ralph Rene.
Obviously, the only shielding they had was the literally paper-thin outer hull of aluminum, and their suits consisting of glass fiber, some aluminum fibers, and silicon rubber.
It's very interesting concerning radiation that the astronauts were protected by a thin film of aluminum, when here on Earth they put a lead shield on us when they take a dental x-ray.
Some theorize that if the Van Allen belts didn't kill the astronauts, even deadlier doses of radiation deeper in space would have. Violent explosions in the sun called magnetic storms flood space with intense radioactivity.
A magnetic storm will come along, and that can increase the intensity of the radiation belts by maybe 1,000 times above what it was before.
According to Rene, the Apollo 16 mission coincided with one of the sun's most intense storms ever recorded.
These discharges that the sun allegedly does, where like even this summer it was like at its peak for strength and stuff like that, when like sometimes there's even like major power outages and things like that, but it's from within the contained environment, in my opinion, not outside of it.
Around the rotating sun came this immense flare, the biggest one of the 20th century. It went on for 3 or 4 days. All the while it's slowly rotating around.
Although the effects of radiation are horrific, ranging from hair loss to cancer to death, the solar flares had no adverse effect on the Apollo 16 crew.
NASA had another problem, and one is that the moon's surface is totally inhospitable to man. You do it in the dark, and that includes any part of the shadow of the spacecraft itself. The temperatures go down to 250 degrees below zero. In the sun, the temperatures go up to 250 degrees above zero.
Rene also theorizes that the astronauts' liquid-cooled spacesuits could not have provided sufficient protection from the intense heat and radiation. But NASA maintains that this hypothesis is wrong.
The claim that the radiation on the lunar surface would have incapacitated or hurt the astronauts, it's equal parts bad science and a bad understanding of how we went about designing the equipment. The spacesuits that they wore were incredibly tough and very resilient to lots of different things.
If those suits do what NASA says they can do, then I want to see them suit up a guy or two, put him into 3 Mile Island, the pit there that's still hot, and have them clean up the mess. But they can't and they don't.
The fact remains that no Apollo astronaut has ever suffered a serious illness from a trip to the moon. Could this be because they never left the safety of Earth's atmosphere in the first place?
This is the main reason why the Russians never really intended to send the men to the moon.
Was it the fear of lethal radiation that caused the Russians to abandon their plans to go to the moon? According to one of their chief cosmonauts, it was certainly a factor.
Of course. We were worried to go out into the unknown of space. Of course, we were fearful. We had no idea how a human would be affected by the radiation. We suspected that possibly the radiation could even penetrate through the craft itself.
Are the deadly perils of space proof that NASA faked the Apollo missions? To this day, the Russians have never sent a man to the moon. And we have no plans to return.
A final word when conspiracy theory continues.
Now that you have heard the various theories and explanations, do you believe it's possible for our government to perpetrate such an incredible hoax? Is it conceivable that with its $40 billion price tag, the Apollo program was nothing more than the most expensive movie ever made?
It is my personal belief, and I totally believe this after all the years of research I've done on this, that NASA never landed a man on the moon.
I would say that anybody who believes that we did not go to the moon is an absolute nut.
Anyone that wants to call me a kook or a nut or a crackpot, they're welcome to do that, but they're also welcome to go examine the evidence, which is everywhere.
Bottom line, the United States went to the moon in the 1960s and the 1970s. End of story.
Is there any way to put this controversy to rest once and for all? The only thing the experts agree upon is that the answer is 250,000 miles away.
No, it's not. It's a little closer than that. So that was interesting. I don't know. What do you guys think? I definitely, I say definitely, but I don't think that we landed on the moon. I think it was all faked. And I've done a lot of videos on this. Take a look at them. And so I do have to get ready for the gym. So on that note, I will leave it at that. And I hope that everyone has a wonderful rest of your day.